into the Israel-Hamas war, and there are new concerns. The conflict is widening. Over the weekend, there was a direct attack on a U.S. warship in the Red Sea, and Charlie D'Agata has the story.
There are incoming reports of a missile striking a commercial vessel off the coast of Yemen. A British maritime agency report says a vessel was hit on its port side by a missile. We don't know the status of that vessel or its crew at this time. A British security firm said the vessel was a Marshall Islands flagged U.S.-owned bulk carrier. Now, this comes a day after a U.S. warship was targeted by a missile from Yemen's Houthis that was successfully intercepted.
There was yet another attack overnight on American forces in the Red Sea. Iranian-backed Houthi militants in Yemen firing a missile toward an American destroyer. It was shot down, according to the Pentagon. It's part of the widening war in the Middle East. It's been 100 days since Hamas launched a surprise attack that Israel had once dismissed as impossible and unimaginable. Overnight, Hamas released a video of 3 hostages, including Noa Argamani, who became a symbol of Hamas cruelty when she was kidnapped from a music festival and taken into Gaza on a motorcycle. The Israeli government says at least 100 hostages are still alive in Gaza. The fate of the youngest hostage, Kafir Bibas, and his family remain unclear. Kafir, kidnapped along with his mother, brother, and father, turns 1 this week.
I want this to be over, really. I want them back. I want them back.
The situation in Gaza is catastrophic, though. The UN says 1.9 million people, 85% of Gaza's population, have now been displaced. And there are now warnings that over 500,000 are now starving, with famine looming. Nearly 24,000 Palestinians have been killed, according to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry. Such is the destruction that for the first time, Israel has found itself this week defending itself at the International Court of Justice against charges of genocide brought by South Africa. Israel vehemently rejects that allegation. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night, in a speech to mark 100 days, was defiant that the war against Hamas will continue. But despite the devastation, Israel is still far from achieving its goals of defeating Hamas or freeing the hostages. Most Israeli officials signal that the fighting is going to go on for months more.
Tensions on the northern border reached a boiling point and stand ready to explode after the killing of 2 Israeli civilians in their homes by Hezbollah rocket fire. The IDF retaliated and announced that the price for the killings is being felt in southern Lebanon. And AlTV's Devo Klein has more.
The IDF called out the Hezbollah attack on a civilian home on the border and launched retaliatory strikes in southern Lebanon. IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari vowed a heightened military response to the anti-tank missile attack on Kfar Yuval, killing a member of the town's local security team and his mother in their home. The price for this will be exacted now and in the future, Hagari said. Barak Ayalon, 45, and his mother, Miri Ayalon, 76, were killed when an anti-tank missile slammed into their home in the largely evacuated border community. Air Force strikes targeted Hezbollah outposts, missiles, launching sites, and command centers deep inside southern Lebanon. As the IDF strikes continue, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah gave another speech from his bunker. Nasrallah vowed that the attacks on Israel would continue as long as the war in Gaza.
And a resounding victory for the ruling party candidate in Taiwan's presidential elections, seen as a blow to China. China had called the vote a choice between war and peace on the island it claims as its own. What the result could now mean for U.S.-China relations. ABC's Britt Clennet reporting from Taiwan.
Tonight, in a victory that could drive a wedge into already testy U.S.-China relations. William Lai Ching-te, despised by China for his pro-independence stance, winning Taiwan's presidential race.
Roaring celebrations here as Lai comes out to meet his supporters as Taiwan's next leader.
Taiwan's voters rebuffing Beijing's repeated warnings that the election is a choice between peace and war. China's government, which has never had control over Taiwan, threatening to take the self-governed island by force if necessary. In his New Year's speech, President Xi even calling the reunification of Taiwan with the mainland a historical inevitability. Li's win comes as the US and China work to mend relations. President Biden and Xi meeting in California in November, and just days ago, military delegates from both countries conducting talks in Washington. Tonight, President Biden seeking to maintain a peaceful status quo with America's One China policy, in which the US and Taiwan have only an unofficial relationship.
With the US appears to be walking a fine line here in response to the election, the State Department issuing a statement congratulating Lai and the people of Taiwan and reiterating calls for peace and stability in this region. All eyes are now on China.
Now to a war that's faded from the front pages in recent weeks. Tomorrow, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is set to travel to Switzerland, seeking more global support with ammunition aid running out in the fight against Russia. Reporting from Kyiv, here's CBS's Chris Livesay.
At a secret location in the cover of night, engineers fire up the booster of a makeshift cruise missile. Do-it-yourself weaponry, its civilian inventors say, can strike Russian targets more than 100 miles away. So it's very lightweight, easy to assemble, and a key feature, extremely cheap, between $2,000 and $10,000 to produce, compared to $10,000 to $100,000 if they were to buy it retail. Desperate bargains Ukraine is now forced to make as U.S. funding dries up. Since Russia's full-scale invasion nearly 2 years ago, the U.S. has provided more than $40 billion in military aid to Ukraine, used to astonishing effect, repelling one of the largest armies in the world. But in recent months, Ukraine has been struggling, thanks in part to Russia's deep supply of munitions from North Korea and attack drones from Iran. Russian attacks are killing civilians every day, says Ukrainian lawmaker Oleksandra Ustinova.
Can Ukraine make it without U.S. military aid?
President Zelensky was very clear when he said it to President Biden, if there is no support coming from the United States, we're done.
If Ukraine falls, that puts Russia firmly at NATO's doorstep, where the treaty demands that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Which means that the United States would have to step in the war. And it would not mean less than 1% of the budget. That would mean trillions of dollars and your boots on the ground.
A point not lost on displaced Ukrainians like Larissa and her son Mark, who lived for 8 months under Russian occupation. If Americans don't pay with their tax dollars for Ukraine to fight against the Russian invasion, she says, they will eventually have to pay with their lives, like we are.
North Korea claims it on Sunday successfully test-fired a solid-fuel intermediate-range ballistic missile that is capable of striking Guam and Japan. This comes as North Korea's foreign minister is set to visit Russia amid increased military collaboration. Pei-Eun-ji has our top story.
North Korea state media claimed Monday that it successfully tested a solid-fuel intermediate-range ballistic missile carrying a hypersonic warhead the day before, as part of the regime's regular activities to develop its weapon systems. It said the test firing did not affect the security of neighboring countries and that it had nothing to do with any situation in the region. The North fired the missile toward waters off its east coast at about 3 p.m. on Sunday afternoon. The South Korean military assessed that the missile, launched from an area near Pyongyang, appears to have been an intermediate-range ballistic missile that traveled about 1,000 kilometers before landing in the East Sea. It added that it shared information on the missile with the US and Japan, and that it's analyzing further details of the launch. In the meantime, the top nuclear envoys from the three nations held a phone call on Sunday and strongly condemned the launch. They said the latest launch has once again shown that North Korea's illegal provocations are the causes of instability in the region, and warned that the security cooperation between the three countries will only become stronger as the regime continues to engage in more provocations. Sunday's missile launch comes about 2 months after the North claimed to have successfully tested new solid-fuel engines for intermediate-range ballistic missiles. Solid-fuel-powered missiles are harder to detect than liquid-fuel ones. And intermediate-range missiles have a maximum range of 5,500 kilometers, which means they're capable of striking U.S. military bases in Guam or Okinawa in Japan. Meanwhile, the North state media also said its foreign minister Choi Son-hee has left Pyongyang to visit Russia. It said her visit from Monday to Wednesday is at the invitation of her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. The two isolated governments have been forging ties following a rare summit between their leaders last September. Officials from South Korea and the U.S. have said the North appears to be supplying military equipment to Russia for use in its war with Ukraine, while Russia was providing technological support for the North's satellite and missile programs.